Hi everyone, I'm going to talk about Staghorn Ferns, also known as Platycerium. There are two species that we could grow comfortably outside in Zone 9, and those are Bifurcatum and Veitchii. The other species are native to warmer climates, so you have to be careful if you're in a cooler climate. So they're found pretty much throughout the world and a lot of various places. Now, they're considered epiphytes, meaning in the wild they grow up on the canopies of trees. Now they're not parasites, so they don't grow into the host plant. Instead, they sort of use the host plant just like a hanger. And the reason is it's quicker to get light that way than to start at the ground and grow up. So wind will blow a spore, because they are ferns, so they have spores, land on the side of a tree, start growing. Now, how are they supposed to get food and water if they're not growing into the host plant and they're not growing in the soil? Well, they have a very unique mechanism. Is they have two different types of leaves. They have the shield leaves, which are the flat green leaves, and then they have the reproductive leaves, which are the leaves that hang out. Now, the shield leaves don't fall off when they die. They build up into layers like a sponge. So when it rains, it holds on to the water and the plant has its own water storage. Secondly, those shield leaves could act as a basket. So dead debris from the tree above falls in it, bird poo, dead insects, and it gets stuck in there, and then compost forms, which is a source of nutrients. So they do have a small root system to anchor onto the tree, but this is a primary way they store water and then get nutrients. Now, it's going to take several years for a staghorn to become reproductive, and you could tell because when you look on the back side, you'll see these brown sori, which are spores. So growing them inside can be a little tricky because a lot of times when you water above the leaf. So unless you have a basin to collect them, it could be difficult. So a lot of people bring them into the sink or the bathtub, soak them. It's like a sponge to refill the dead leaves. They probably don't need a lot of water inside because you're not having direct sun hit them. They do need a lot of light inside. An east or a south window is ideal. Growing them outside is easier because you could, of course, water and the water just falls down. Rainwater is great for them. Mount them onto a tree, put them on a fence. They take morning sun, but they need afternoon shade or dappled shade. And you know, it is a good idea in the winter that if they're up against the tree and the fence, instead of being out in the open, they'll handle the cold much better. Now, what happens when your staghorn fern gets too big? We've had a few donated to the conservatory. One time, one was from someone whose grandfather started in 1946, and they brought it, and it was 5 feet wide, 5 feet away. Hopefully, good thing is they let it dry out because when they're full of water, they're very heavy. We couldn't hang it, just like they couldn't hang it. It would have taken our whole entire conservatory down. So we did divide it and make it into smaller plants. So it is very possible to divide them. And the way to do it is simple. You're going to want to take a serrated knife, one that's sterilized with hydrogen peroxide ideally and has nice sharp teeth. This is a pruning saw. And you're going to find a plant. So they do multiply, especially the bifurcatums, and you're just basically going to cut around the green shield leaves and get a good chunk of the dead leaves down below. So I'm going to find one that's off to the side, which is ideal, and I'm just going to take my pruning saw and I'm going to cut into it. So you could see right here, I'm actually, there we go, cutting. Now sometimes it can be a little tricky. That's why a serrated knife works better. So the camera shakes, right? You could see I got a chunk of it. Now what I'm going to do is two things you could mount them on. A piece of redwood. Redwood's great because it resists rot. And then we use a lot at the conservatory is the cork oak bark that you could buy at a lot of times orchid suppliers because you mount orchids on these, but those two materials work the best. And of course you want it a little bit bigger than the plant, so take into consideration growth it's going to have. And then going to just take sphagnum moss, wetted. You don't want to work with it when it's dry because it's very hard to wet in place and you want to mix the water in. We actually reuse our sphagnum moss unless something's died a horrific death of a disease because it is not very sustainable at this point, but it is still really good to use. So we try to be cautious with how much we throw away or compost. And you're just going to want to place that between the plant and the bark, a good amount. And then you're going to place your flat piece of Staghorn fern. And sometimes I get the question of which way is up. This one's easy because you could see sort of the scalloping of the shield leaf sort of exposed away from the back. So that's how I know it's up. And you're going to place it on there. And then what you're going to want to do is, we find that fishing line, sturdy fishing line, works the best to hold it in place. Don't worry about tearing into the plants or pushing into the plants. They actually recover pretty darn well. So, you know, however it works for you to secure it. I'm not the best at tying knots and tying things down, so I do it in a very messy fashion. So we'll just pretend I did it right here. So something else, if you don't want to mount it, or you have a small one that doesn't quite need mounting yet, you can grow them flat. So we grow them in orchid baskets with sphagnum moss, and they're just laying flat. You could hang them, or you could just leave them down. You know, they don't need to be, it takes a while for them to dry out, even at the conservatory. They don't need water every day, every few days, but it is a good idea to prevent the dead shield leaves from drying out.